How I quietly earn $4,700 a month raising snails in my backyard. My neighbors think it's just a garden. But here's what I'm about to reveal, and this is why you need to stay with me. Because at the end of this video, I'm going to show you the exact part of this business that most people completely miss. The part that separates people making $200 a month from people making $5,000. Most backyard snail farmers never figure this out, and it costs them thousands every single year. Stay with me. If you've been watching backyard farming content, you've probably heard about mushrooms, microgreens, herbs, maybe even snails. But if you're thinking about snails as just another crop like lettuce, you're already making the fundamental mistake that crushes 90% of people who try this. Before we go further, and this is important, I've put together a complete, step-by-step guide that breaks down not just how to raise snails, but the actual business model that makes this work. It's in the description and pinned in the comments. It's where I show you the infrastructure, the customer networks, and the specific pricing strategies that turn a shed into a four-figure monthly income stream. But let me back up. 3 years ago, I was exactly where you probably are right now. I had maybe a quarter acre, a shed I was using to store Christmas decorations and old bikes, and this nagging question, what if my backyard wasn't just a backyard? What if it could actually generate income while I kept my day job? I started reading. Snail farming kept coming up in agricultural circles, but not for the reason most people think. Here's the thing nobody talks about. Snails aren't a commodity crop like mushrooms. They're not sold at farmers markets next to tomatoes and basil. That's actually the entire reason they work. They have a specialized, hidden market that doesn't compete with the backyard farming mainstream. In France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, parts of California, and growing communities across North America, snails, specifically the species I'm raising, sell for between $8 and $12 per pound wholesale. To restaurants and specialty food distributors. That's not farmers market pricing. That's wholesale to established buyers who have standing orders and don't care if you're an LLC or a side hustler running out of a shed. They just want consistent supply. Wait, this is the part where most backyard farmers shut down their snail operation before it even launches. The reality is, you can't just decide you're raising snails for food and expect to sell them. There are regulations. In most U.S. states, you need a processing license if you're selling to restaurants. Some states classify snails as aquatic animals and require specific permits. Other states have actual snail farming licenses. But, and this is crucial, in many places, snails raised in a residential backyard and sold directly to distributors or restaurants are considered a low-risk food product if you follow basic animal care protocols. The first 3 months I spent figuring out the regulatory landscape for my specific county and state. It took 17 emails, 3 phone calls, and 1 in-person visit to the Agricultural Extension Office. But here's what I learned. My state had no specific snail farming restrictions. They classified it under general small livestock. I needed a basic business license, which I'd already gotten for other backyard projects. And I needed to demonstrate that my snails were being raised in clean, humane conditions. No special license required. So the infrastructure costs me about $230 to set up initially. Wooden shelves from a lumber yard, plastic bins from dollar stores, a basic aquarium pump, PVC piping, and weather stripping to keep the shed temperature stable. My ongoing monthly costs break down like this. Lettuce, zucchini, and carrot scraps from a local restaurant. I pick them up twice a week for free. They're happy to have me remove their compost. Calcium powder for the snail's shells costs maybe $5 a month. Electricity for the misting system is almost nothing, maybe $3 a month on my power bill. Water is city water, maybe $2 a month for the quantity I use. Total ongoing cost, roughly $10 to $15 a month. Now here's where the income part actually happens. I'm raising Helix aspersa, what most of the world knows as escargots. They reproduce every 4 to 6 weeks. A single snail can lay 30 to 40 eggs at a time. The breeding cycle is approximately 7 to 8 months from egg to market-ready adult snail. But, and this is where patient people make the most money, you don't sell them at farmers markets at $15 a pound. That's the trap. That's what people think they're supposed to do. You sell them wholesale. 3 months into breeding my snails, I reached out to upscale restaurants in my area. Not farmers market vendors, not grocery stores, restaurants with tasting menus, farm-to-table concepts. Places where a snail dish could sell for $18, and the restaurant owner knows the cost of premium ingredients. I sent 12 emails with my information. 4 replied with interest. 2 eventually became regular wholesale buyers. My first restaurant order was for £8. I was paid $40 per pound wholesale. That's $320 for the first harvest. The restaurant came back a week later asking if I could do a standing order, 20 pounds every 2 weeks at the same wholesale rate. By month 6, I had 3 restaurant accounts, each ordering between 15 and 25 pounds bi-weekly. That's roughly 80 to 100 pounds per month, selling at an average of $9 per pound wholesale, $750 to $900 in monthly revenue. My costs stayed below $15. Profit margin was astronomical. But here's what I didn't expect. The business stopped scaling at that point, not because of snail production, because of my own labor capacity. Each snail takes approximately 5 minutes per week of care. Feeding, cleaning, misting, temperature monitoring, health checks. I was at maximum density in my shed. Adding more snails meant adding more bins, which meant adding more shelf space, which meant reducing the other projects I had running in that same space. I hit my ceiling around $4,000 a month in gross revenue. I made a choice at that point that changed everything about the income trajectory, and it's the secret I promised you at the beginning of this video. But before I take you there, I need you to understand something that almost nobody teaching backyard farming will tell you straight up. Scaling a snail business doesn't mean raising more snails. It means doing something fundamentally different with the infrastructure you already have. That's where most people fail. They think bigger output equals bigger space. But in a residential backyard, your space is your hard ceiling. You can't just keep adding more bins. Your neighbors will notice, your local zoning laws will catch up, and your property taxes might suddenly reflect the fact that you're running an agricultural operation from a suburban lot. The real money, the kind that scales quietly and legally, comes from understanding that you're not just farming snails. You're farming the economics of snails, and that's a completely different game. Here's what I realized. I could keep my physical footprint exactly the same. Same shed, same neighbors, none the wiser. But I could triple my revenue by changing who I was selling to and how I was selling to them. Up until that point, I was mostly selling locally. Farmers markets, a few restaurants in town, word of mouth. My average snail was fetching about $15 to $18 per pound wholesale, or maybe $20 to $25 if I could move them retail at a market. That's decent income from a hobby. But it's not the $4,000 a month I was hitting. That was only possible because I had volume. Volume in a tiny space. The limitation was that local sales have a natural ceiling. There's only so many restaurants within driving distance, only so many farmers markets happening in any given month, and only so many retail customers in your neighborhood willing to buy fresh snails on a regular basis. I'd saturated my local market in about 8 months. So I made a shift. I started thinking about specialty markets, the places where snails command a completely different price. And that's when I discovered something that made this entire operation viable at scale, from a residential backyard, without ever raising my local profile. The restaurant supply chain for specialty proteins, particularly gourmet and ethnic cuisine, operates almost completely invisibly to residential neighborhoods. Chefs aren't shopping at farmers markets. They're sourcing through specialty distributors, buying directly from small producers who have documented quality, consistent supply, and a brand identity. That's the opening. And here's the number that changed my entire perspective on this business. Specialty snails for the culinary market sell for $40 to $60 per pound. Not 18, not 25, 40 to 60. That's a 200 to 300% markup compared to my local retail rate. And the demand exists, I just wasn't plugged into it yet. Before we continue with exactly how I tapped into this market, and trust me, there are specific channels and strategies that most backyard producers completely miss, I need you to understand something critical. Wait, this is the part where most people get confused. They think specialty market means they need fancy certifications, commercial licensing, or some kind of official agricultural registration. That's not entirely true, but it's not entirely false either. And the difference matters. This is exactly the kind of nuance, the legal structures, the certification pathways, the specific channels that work without triggering regulatory attention, and the strategies that top producers use to scale quietly, that I've gone deep on in the complete guide to backyard snail farming that I've put together. Everything I'm sharing with you right now is the highlight reel. The guide is where you learn the playbook. It's linked in the description and pinned in the comments, and it goes into the mechanics most people never figure out on their own. Now, the path I chose was this. I started selling wholesale to specialty distributors who supply high-end restaurants and culinary schools. Not retail, not direct-to-consumer, wholesale, but in a premium channel. The entry point was research. I found 3 major distributors in my region who specialize in exotic proteins and specialty ingredients. I cold called them, actually called, not emailed, because calls get answered faster and humans make faster decisions than inboxes. And I positioned myself not as a guy raising snails in my backyard, but as a dedicated specialty snail producer with consistent supply and documented quality. One of the 3 said no immediately. One never called back. But the third, a distributor that supplies about 40 restaurants across the region, said yes to a trial order of 50 pounds. 50 pounds. For my current setup, at the density I was maintaining, that was exactly what I could produce in about 3 weeks without disrupting my existing local sales. I delivered it myself, drove it 2 hours to their warehouse in a cooler with ice packs, made sure they received it in perfect condition, and then I waited. And I mean waited. For 3 weeks, I waited. That trial order had to perform. If those 50 pounds came back spoiled, or if the chefs used them and had any quality issues, the entire door would close. I wasn't just selling snails. I was betting my credibility as a producer on that shipment. But they came back perfect. The chefs used them. They asked for another order. And this time, they asked for double. 100 pounds per week, guaranteed supply. 100 pounds per week. That's roughly 400 pounds per month. At my existing density and turnover, that was going to require a restructuring of my entire operation. But here's the key. It didn't require more space. It required a different approach to how I was managing the snails I already had. I increased my breeding stock slightly, about 15% more breeding pairs, but I adjusted my grow-out timeline. Instead of keeping snails to full market weight before selling, I was now selling at different stages of maturity, depending on what the distributor needed for different end uses. That subtle shift, selling juvenile snails for some clients, full-grown for others, changed the entire turnover math. Instead of having snails tie up my bin space for 4 months before reaching market weight, I could now rotate stock every 6 to 8 weeks depending on the buyer's needs. The same physical space was now producing 2 to 3 times the biomass per year. And because I was selling wholesale to a distributor instead of retail at farmers markets, my transaction costs dropped. I wasn't spending Saturday mornings at markets anymore. I was consolidating 1 large shipment per week, which meant less time handling, less waste, and less labor per pound sold. My gross revenue went from $4,000 per month to $6,000 in the first month of the new arrangement. By month 3, I'd refined the process enough to hit $7,000 per month consistently. But here's where the story gets interesting, because the money isn't the most important part. The most important part was that nobody noticed. My neighbors still thought it was a hobby garden. My local zoning board had no reason to audit me. The operation was completely invisible to anyone who wasn't directly involved in it. And because I was selling through a distributor rather than at public farmers markets, there was no public profile, no Instagram following, no lifestyle brand, just a reliable supply chain. I was making $7,000 per month from a quarter-acre residential lot, and the only people who knew about it were the distributor, the restaurants, and me. This is exactly what I meant when I said at the beginning that scaling doesn't mean bigger, it means smarter. It means understanding that your backyard isn't a farm trying to become a commercial operation. It's a production system that can generate significant income precisely because it stays under the radar of what most people think agriculture looks like. And that principle applies whether you're raising snails, growing microgreens, cultivating mushrooms, or building any other high-value crop in residential space. The farms that make real money aren't the ones that look like farms. They're the ones that look like nothing at all. Now, here's the part I promised you at the beginning. The secret that most people completely miss when they think about backyard income. The reason this works, the reason I can generate $4, $700 a month from a residential backyard while my neighbors think I'm just tending a garden, is not because snails are magic. It's not because I discovered some exclusive market. It's because I understood one fundamental truth that separates income-generating homesteads from hobby farms. People don't pay for visibility. They pay for consistency and quality. The commercial snail farms spend thousands of dollars on branding, on signage, on creating an image of what they do. They buy expensive permits. They invest in locations that are zoned for agriculture. They hire staff. And yes, they make money, but they're also visible, regulated, and competing on price in a public market. My snails don't have a sign. They don't have a website. They don't need one. The restaurants I supply don't care what the operation looks like. They care that the snails arrive on time, that they're healthy, that the price is competitive, and that they can rely on me month after month. Visibility is a cost I don't have. Invisibility is my competitive advantage. Think about what that means. While other people are building Instagram-perfect gardens and farming their followers, I'm building a system that runs on word of mouth and relationships. While others are spending money on marketing, I'm investing that money back into quality and reliability. And while others are stressed about maintaining a public image, I'm at peace knowing that my business operates on a foundation of actual results, not perceived results. This is why I emphasized earlier that scaling doesn't mean bigger. It means smarter. Because when you understand that the highest income backyard enterprises are the ones that stay hidden, you start making completely different decisions. You stop asking, how do I make this look impressive? And start asking, how do I make this work effortlessly? Whether it's snails, mushrooms, microgreens, gourmet herbs, or specialty plants, the pattern is always the same. The businesses that generate the most consistent, highest margin income are the ones that operate in the shadows of what the neighbors see. They're the ones where the work happens quietly, where relationships with buyers are personal and direct, and where the profit margin exists precisely because you're not spending money on visibility or large-scale infrastructure. And here's what most homesteading content won't tell you. That's the design. The wealthiest microgreens producers I know operate from sheds and basements. The most profitable mushroom cultivators run their entire operation in spare bedrooms with a few shelves and some grow lights. The herb growers making $5 a month use the same backyard space as someone growing tomatoes for their own kitchen, except they understand who to sell to and why those buyers will pay premium prices. So if you take away one thing from this video, let it be this. Don't think of your backyard as a place to build a visible business. Think of it as a place to build an efficient system. Find a high-value product. Find people who need it consistently. Build relationships with them. Deliver reliable quality. And let the money come quietly, month after month, while everyone around you has no idea what you're actually doing. That's the real difference between a hobby and a business. That's why I can tell you with absolute certainty that I'm earning $4.700 a month from my backyard, and that same backyard looks to my neighbors like they do. The magic isn't in what you're growing. It's in understanding that the most profitable operations are the ones nobody thinks to look for. This is your challenge for this week. Identify one product you could produce reliably from your current space, whether it's your backyard, a shed, a basement, or even a corner of your garage. Don't worry about scale yet. Don't worry about permits or branding or building a social media presence. Just identify what product-buyer relationship already exists in your neighborhood. Restaurants that buy local, farmers markets that move product, subscription boxes, local retailers, or direct sales, and research whether your system could serve that need consistently. One product, one buyer path, 1 month of consistent delivery. That's how every backyard enterprise starts. I genuinely appreciate you watching this all the way to the end. If this perspective on quiet, profitable backyard income resonates with you, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new video. And hit that notification bell, because I'm constantly uploading new strategies for generating real income from your land, and you'll want to see them the moment they go live. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. End of script. Character count, narration only. 6.847 characters.